everybody, what's up? Circus here coming at you with another discussion video tonight. I got Negative1 in here. In case you guys don't know who Neg is, he's I guess a pro player in the Twitch and Discord community. In case you don't know some of the things he's done, he's won the KC Cup back in November of 2019. He took third place in February of 2020 and then second place in September of 2020. How you doing, Neg?
Doing well. Glad to be back as always.
In case if you guys are new to the show, we used to do a podcast on Sunday nights on our Twitch channel, and let's say we did 75 episodes. I think Negative1 was there for like 36 of them. He was there for a lot of them, so we're very familiar with Neg. So the reason we're having you on is because this week a new tier list came out, and there was a controversial choice on there. And I wanted to bring you on and talk about that a little bit. Right now, we have gameplay footage of you playing in last night's battle phase with Witchcrafters, which is the deck that is got everybody up in arms right now. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. But before we get into that, you are a top player council member in the Duel Links meta community, right?
That is correct, yes.
And how does one become a TPC member, as they call it?
So the process of becoming a TPC member in the Duel Links meta community is consistent performance over multiple tournaments over a 3-month period, essentially.
Okay, so you have to do well in their events or any event.
So it's a combination of Duel Links meta events and KC Cups.
Okay.
So not all events are counted, but you do well in multiple Duel Links meta tournaments, you get points for depending on how well you perform, and then the 16 players with the most points will be offered a position in the TPC.
Now, do you guys have a hierarchy? Are there higher members in the TPC than other members? Is there like executive vice president or something like that?
There are not. Pretty much everybody in TPC has 1 vote, and everybody is equal. Doesn't matter how many points you got or how few points you got. If you're in TPC, your vote is equal.
Okay, so you're talking about votes here. So I'm assuming you use those votes on determining the tier list, right? So how does that process even start? Do you guys just I'm assuming you meet at least once a week at like Denny's around a big table, coffee, maybe some waffles, something like that, and you start discussing decks?
Well, there's we like the maple syrup, but so in all honesty, the vote is typically it's posted, and we are all TPC members are asked to vote on the tier list, and everybody gives their vote, and it is inherently anonymous. You don't have to tell anyone else how you voted.
Okay.
Some TPC members are more willing to share their vote than others. However, ultimately, you can vote one way and then or say you voted a different way. There's no restriction on that.
Well, how do you guys determine what decks are even up to vote?
So there's always the list of decks that are presently on the tier list, and then there's a poll of are there any other decks that should be included in the vote? Any decks that have popped up recently that we should consider? Say, especially after ban lists happen, decks that aren't on the tier list that should be put back on the tier list. Say Thunder Dragons, for example.
Mm-hmm.
If enough people think that a deck should be at least up on the vote, then it will be available to be tiered.
Now, do you guys maybe get together? Is there collusion ahead of time? Because we've brought this up before. I'm gonna hit you a little again about this one. Stromberg. Okay, there was a time when Stromberg was performing well in tournaments. Never even made tier 3 status. Where was there Negative1 working in the background a little bit? Maybe do you guys get together and you're like, Stromberg's gonna be up to vote, no chance in hell? Does that kind of thing happen?
Uh, I've always been a very strong proponent, excuse me, against Stromberg, but I can't like tell anybody else how to vote.
Right,
I
but I
can
mean,
have
you're paying for that maple syrup for them. Like, oh, give them a little extra bacon, something like that. When you guys are at Denny's, right?
yeah, but I mean, you can talk as much as you want. There
Right.
are there are a decent number of people who will just vote and not even pay attention. Like you can like there have been like top layer council seasons where uh, maybe 4 people talk in the channel, and then we have at least 12 other players that only vote and don't like say anything. You know?
Okay. Okay. So you're almost on an island, or is it always there's just not a lot of discussion, so it just comes down to people just voting and just seeing what happens. So it's very much it's not like a consensus thing.
Um, it should be is the thing. The idea is that we can all come together and then discuss ideas and what our thoughts on the meta are, and
Hmm.
then through that discussion we can come to a final like agreed upon tier list. Um, the issue is that it doesn't always happen. There are times when some people are either not active or they don't want to discuss or they don't want to listen to other opinions, and then they will vote regardless of what anyone else says.
Okay, so do
Um,
all 16 members vote? Can you have a tier list if 4 people abstain or something like that?
you can, I think.
What's the lowest amount, I guess? Have you ever had one where it's like 5 people vote?
Well, I think there was one tier list. It was okay, so there was one vote where it was like 3 people voted, and then um, it was like it was the day before like the okay, so there's always like a deadline of when the like the poll is closed,
Hmm.
so just so that the tier list can be updated for that week. And it was like the day of the deadline, and I think like 3 people voted, and then like there was a ping sent out like, "Hey, everybody vote!" And like of the people that didn't vote, none of them voted, and then one of the people who already voted voted again because they forgot.
So it's a pretty
But then,
official process. Then it's well regulated.
it, well, later on, more people voted, you know. But
Hmm.
that's just like one of the funny stories I like to say when it's like, so everybody's voting on the tier list. No, there are times when participation is low. This is not like the norm. There's typically multiple votes, and since that point, actually, probably because of that, like participation is like a requirement to stay in TPC. Like if you
Okay.
just don't vote on any tier lists, then they like remove you.
So what's the average vote count now out of 16?
Um,
Like 12, 14?
probably like 15 or 16. Pretty
Okay.
much everybody votes.
All right. So is there ever times when you get ties? Is that when we end up with multiple decks in the same tier?
Um,
Well, how is it even like you? Okay, let's say you go in and there's Witchcrafters and you put the word tier 2 next to it, right? Does it have to get like multiple people saying tier 2? What if like I guess if more people say tier 1, you got 5 people saying tier 1 and 4 people saying tier 2, it's a tier 1 deck?
um, it is a majority vote,
Okay.
or I guess I should say a plurality vote. So whatever section gets the most votes will like be where the deck is posted. So say it's like three people vote a deck tier 1, 5 people vote a deck tier 2, and then 3 people vote a deck tier 3. It's like even though majority isn't at any point, because tier 2 has the most votes, then it gets put into tier 2.
Okay. All right. So that's kind of what happened this past week then with Witchcrafters.
Yes, it was. There was some division on where Witchcrafters should be put on the tier list.
Okay.
We'll say that.
We'll get into that in a little bit here. Another thing I want to clear up: what is the tier list function? Now, a lot of people I think get confused or don't really understand what the function of the DLM tier list is supposed to be. You and I have talked about it at length on End Phase, our old podcast and stuff. Almost till we were almost yelling at each other about it. But what is the tier list function?
So, in my opinion, the tier list is a representation of what the meta should be. Like, everyone plays correctly, what deck is strongest, what is next strongest, and so on and so forth. So, what it shouldn't be, at least in my opinion, is a representation of what is being played. So, I think if you just look at what people are playing and then how it's performing, you don't need a top layer council for that. If you want like raw data on like how decks are performing, like there's the power rankings. Like you can just check those videos. Like that will tell you what you want to hear.
Attaboy, attaboy. Thank you.
Like the purpose of the tier list is that it's supposed to give you the opinions and like the insight of top players. Like that's why it's done by TPC. Like if you want an informed if you want like a tier list that is based on like how the game should be played at the top level, then that's why you need a top player council, you know?
So I think some of the misconceptions are that if a deck is tier 1, it is the best for ladder play, or a different format other than just tournaments, and it should be the one that is winning in tournaments, I think, is the other misconception.
Yeah, so there's the tier list can sometimes has historically been misunderstood as it like its function is for a format other than the best of one. So the best of one is ladder play. You play one game, one game, one game. Whereas for the tier list, it's indicated for a best of three, is typically with side deck, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And then because the existence of there's the presence of side deck that can vary, like what decks are more effective or less effective.
So now with the tier list, what you guys are trying to do, if I understand correctly, is take a look at maybe what happened last week. Look at the changes that might be happening in the game, maybe a ban list, something like that, a skill change, new cards released, and then you're trying to predict for the next week how the decks are going to do.
That sounds about right. Yeah. Like, just looking at the performance of decks and then the top layer council, you have to like look at the results and then say, is this indicative of like a larger trend? Like, does this mean this deck is the best deck, or does this mean that someone just kind of got lucky? For example, if Dragoonity wins a tournament, or if I know Dragoonity has gotten second place in like multiple battle phases, but
Don't say that. I'm gonna have to edit that now. Thanks.
oh,
Thanks.
sorry.
Right.
But if say random deck that may use dragons happens,
Stromberg.
yeah, that gets like near the top of multiple events.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you have to ask: is the deck good, or is it that it's somewhat taking advantage of players not understanding how to beat the deck?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so it's not necessarily always how well it performs. It's maybe on paper, is this a good deck?
Yeah. So, for example, I think Karakuri is it's a good example of a deck that some people don't think is good because of some performances.
Hmm.
However, like especially this week, Karakuri has like dominated top cuts in the battle phases. I believe. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. Yes, it has. It's been doing very well.
Yeah. So that's an example of if you were just to go off results, you might think that Karakuri, oh, it's not tier one. But if you have like an informed opinion and you understand what the strengths of the deck are, then you would be able to judge that no, perhaps this was just an off week. Going forward, Karakuri is still a strong strategy, and therefore it should be in this position. And then this week kind of like supports that.
Okay, so you guys try to look at things more in the long term then, rather than just this past week. Like, oh, it was hot this week. It's tier one, or it's tier zero, or I'm sorry, tier nothing, right? Tier four, tier five, or whatever. Maybe we just get rid of it altogether just because it had a bad week. You guys try to look at it. Maybe it just had a bad week. We're gonna give it another week and see how it does.
Yeah, so that's kind of like why the TPC is there. You know, if it's just going off of raw data, then it's susceptible to like knee-jerk reactions. You know,
Hmm.
like if nobody plays the deck because they're scared to play. Like, um, for example, if Ritual Beasts just get released and it's like we like after the fact we know Ritual Beasts are like a good deck, but like on release we don't know if how it will perform.
Hmm.
There's you know we don't have to just like demote it immediately when we could if we think that it will be good, then we can tier it.
Okay.
This is what I'm saying.
All right. Now that we've discussed the tier list a little bit, I kind of want to get into the Witchcrafter thing because a lot of people saying this past week TPC high as hell right now, calling Witchcrafters tier two. Um, I might be in that boat, Neg. I might be in that boat. Uh, we have the power rankings here, and that was a direct result of you guys ranking Crystron's number one for so long. And I just disagree because you guys were like, oh, it's the best deck on paper. It's just got to have a good pilot. And it never had any tournament results because of it. So I was like, we got to have a better system, sir. And the power rankings were born. And what's funny now is that Crystron's are not a top tier deck, and they're performing better than they ever did, right? I just think that's
Yeah.
funny. So here we are now. We're almost in the same situation, Neg. This is a deck that's obviously a personal favorite of yours. We see it on. I have proof right now. It's on the screen. You're playing it. I have your deck list above your head. It's one of your favorite decks, it seems like. But it's been underperforming in tournaments over the past month. We were talking about it before we did the video. Representation is down over the past 3 weeks. Its top eights have been dropping. It went from 3 weeks ago from like 5 tops down to 3 tops, and it had no top eights at all last week. So I know you guys like giving a deck a second chance, but at this point, can you really say that Witchcrafters are still a strong deck in the format?
Okay. The short yes.
Yes.
However, the long answer is a little more complicated. So I think bringing up the point you mentioned about Crystron's, like when TPC was in agreement that it was tier one the best deck, but it wasn't performing that well in tournaments.
Or at
I think
all. Just terribly, by the way.
like if you look at, for example, if you looked at the KC Grand tournaments,
Mm-hmm.
like in June, Crystron's won that. Like this is just like to give you an idea that sometimes maybe the best deck isn't winning all the tournaments. It doesn't mean that it's not the best deck. It's just that there
Well,
are a number of factors why some decks perform better or worse in tournaments.
well, shouldn't the
And
best deck be winning? That's always my point. If it is the best deck, it should be winning all the time. Dark Lords. We could sit and talk about that deck. I hate that deck. It was the best deck. It won all the time.
If the best deck is tier 0, then it should be winning all the time. However, there are instances when the best deck is the best deck, but it's not better by such a large margin that it will dominate every event. So I think if you look at, say, back last September in 2019,
Mm-hmm.
or no, maybe it was August. Somewhere around that time, there were like multiple decks in the meta game. There was Desperado, there was Six Sams, and like there was like a best deck in the form of, I think it was Desperado, but at the time, like decks were so close together that Desperado wasn't like winning all events. There were like multiple decks that were performing well and winning.
Mm-hmm. Well, then, can you really call it the best deck? Would you say they're all just kind of in that same range, or do you just feel the need to call one of them the best?
Well, when there's multiple decks, there will always be a best,
Mm-hmm.
or there are. I
But
suppose there's
are
an
we just
idea.
saying by it could just be by a small margin at that point? Does it really even matter to have that title if you're only the best deck by like 1%, -1%?
Just like by a small margin, it can. At that point, it's just to make people feel better.
Right.
If it's not, it can be like the best deck, but if it's only by like a small margin, and you're kind of just saying it to be like, yeah, I'm running the best deck. What
Mhm.
about it? Really, it doesn't matter if it's the best deck or not, or what people think. It's like, I don't know.
Well, another argument.
Some titles don't matter.
Okay.
Sorry?
I'm sorry. The other argument I like to make is if it's really one of the best decks around, why can't everybody play it? Why does it have to be so damn complicated? Yes, a deck like Christians or Witchcrafters, they have many paths you can go down in the long run, right? But why is not like a more straightforward deck, like let's say Dark Magician, considered the best deck? I know it has some caveats, whatever, but like a simple deck that anybody can pick up and start playing and start winning, topping in tournaments. I mean, really, isn't that a better deck?
It's an,
I
This
know
is
I know what you
where-
want to say, because it's like comparing jazz to pop music, right? Jazz, oh yeah, it's a higher form of music, but only like 3 people can play it. But everybody loves pop music, so which one's actually better?
yeah,
You know?
yeah, that's a good comparison. It's just that, how should I say, some decks don't take as much effort to play optimally.
Mm-hmm.
I suppose, not to insult anyone who plays any deck in particular.
We know what you're saying. Just say it. Just say it.
All right. Well, for example, a deck like Luna Lights,
Mhm.
there are not a great deal of plays available to the deck.
Right.
It's very like your pushes are with Cat Dancer or Saber Dancer, and then it's very one note or 1 or 2 options that you can go for. And decks like that, like they can perform well because they are simple. However, when people play correctly, those decks don't perform well. Like,
So whether you play it well or not, it doesn't do well. But like, let's say like a Shiranui. I know there's 7 different versions now of the deck. But Shiranui or a Dark Magician, these are decks that anybody can pick up, learn the combos pretty quick, or the control version, and do well in tournaments. I mean, we see it all the time. Doesn't that make them a better deck, a more accessible deck, at least? And if someone that's new can pick up a deck, get top 8, or even win a tournament, isn't that a better deck than a deck that they have to pick up and spend months studying, watching videos, listening to Negative1 talk about it?
well, let me put it this way: like, if you play these 2 decks perfectly, and even if one deck like takes much longer to like perfect,
Mm-hmm.
Wouldn't the deck that wins more be the better deck?
What
You
deck?
can argue like, oh, you can play this easier, or like it takes less time to play this. But if you play both correctly and one of them wins more, that's what I would say is the better deck.
You played Witchcrafters last night. What deck knocked you out of the tournament, by the way?
I ended up losing to Hero
The
in top
Heroes.
four. In
So
top four,
is
I got
Heroes
hit
a
with
better deck? Is Heroes a better deck then?
Treacherous Trap Hole in 22 cards. So
Well,
I'll let you decide.
well, you can only react to the cards that are played. If a card is in the game, you can't get mad at that. You know?
Yeah. So it's unfortunate. I think I could, like in that situation, like I actually could have played better and maybe not lost to it.
Okay. Okay.
So like even in that situation, I would say that was myself making a mistake, not the deck
Fair enough.
being
Fair enough.
weaker.
Okay. All right. Now that we've argued about that a little bit, what is it about Witchcrafters that makes it, in your mind, a better deck than most out there right now?
So the strength of Witchcrafter is really the grind game.
Mm-hmm.
So thing about the nerfs is that it took away a lot of the mill cards.
Right.
However, you got to realize that the mill cards were just to push the deck into the mid or late game. But if you know how to play the early game, you don't lose as much as people think you might.
Hey, explain that, please, because I think that's where a lot of people are like, okay, you lost the grass, you only got one charge. What are you doing? This deck is doo doo
So,
now. How do we play this deck?
all right, so let me put it this way. Charge is one card in your deck.
Mm-hmm.
Grass is one card in your deck. If you lose both of those, in 30 cards, you lose 2 in 30. How much, like, what percentage of your deck is, like, 2 in 30? Like, it's not a big deal. Like, yeah, those cards were powerful, but realistically, if the deck was as good as, like, if it was so good that it could win tournaments, it could be placed consistently, then losing that small percentage should not drastically reduce the win rate, you know? Because you're only seeing those cards like so much of the time, right? So out of 30 cards, if you lose 2, that's not a large percentage of your deck.
Mm-hmm.
And if the deck was performing so well before the losing those cards, you aren't seeing both of those cards like every game. So realistically, it should still be good after the ban list.
Okay, so how do you get the deck going then?
So I think a mistake a lot of players will do is that they will summon their monster and then they will immediately go into Madame Vare. And
Okay,
it's like, all right, this is my boss monster and this is my win condition.
right.
And that is almost always a mistake.
Mm-hmm.
So the win condition for Witchcrafters is really the card economy because that's what makes it like so oppressive. Having Vare with so many spells in hand is what makes it so that they can't just push into Vare, and it's what makes it so that you can like negate every turn.
Right, and I've noticed you've changed the deck so Vare's not the boss monster right away. You go into it right away. You're also not synchroing with this deck, I noticed.
Yeah, so something I tried with this build, I might change in the future. Like I think something I noticed when testing with multiple tuners is that they're not as good as they might appear. So the issue with a lot of the tuners is that they compete for your normal summon. And in the early game,
Mm.
you're always going to be summoning a Witchcrafter monster, not like a tuner.
Okay.
So running all these tuners just to like have a synchro play, if you aren't having a normal play, then it's not worth it. So you're better off having more spells or more cards that are standalone safe.
Mm-hmm.
instead of having like a tuner to extend in a mid game. Because like if you aren't playing the early game, you can't just anticipate that you will make it to the mid game.
Okay, and that's kind of a signature with your decks. I notice is you like the consistency slash stability of simpler builds because we see some builds on decks and they'll have a monster core and then basically Highlander everything else.
Yeah, so um, I do like prefer a more consistent strategy. I think to a degree, if you can't play the game, then you're not gonna win.
Right.
So
So if
yeah, I think
if you're not starting with a good hand consistently, you're just not going to be able to play.
yeah, and if you're running cards that are like, if you're running cards that don't help you play the game, then those have to have like a very strong function. Otherwise, they are hurting you more than they are helping you.
Now I have to ask, just because it's the memer in me, please tell me you XZ summon at least once with this deck.
I was about to, but then my opponent used a needle sealing.
So. Oh no, what were you going to go into?
I think I was gonna go into a cowboy.
Oh, nice. Have you ever actually done it? No?
No. You don't go into too many XYZs. Like in this extra deck, for example, like I don't have too many good like XYZ like targets.
Mm-hmm.
That's partially because I didn't buy the new box, so I don't have Utopia.
Oh, okay.
Get the structure deck, so I have Cowboy, but
you got Temtem.
I don't have like
Temtem gets in there.
Yeah, he did for sure.
No, he's pretty weak attack, isn't he? 1700, I think.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah. I mean, could you ever actually imagine going into any of them besides Cowboy?
I don't think so. For example, like the Tin Archduke, I would never summon him.
No.
The only reason I put him in is because I had extra space, and
right.
I have a prismatic of him, so I thought, why not?
Oh, yeah, you got it then.
Yeah.
And Zubaba General doesn't really do anything. Are there any warriors in the deck?
There are not.
Okay.
So it's 2000 vanilla.
And the reptile one, oh my god, that is the gigantic hassle of XZ's monsters.
Indeed, it is.
Three monsters to make a 2950 beater. It can't even crash into blue eyes.
Yeah.
So how many of those do you have? You have 3, right?
The Gaga Gigo?
Yeah.
That one's from the card trader, so...
Right. You should have 3 by now, then.
They are not showing up. I don't know why.
Yeah, same with me. I got my 1, and that's it.
Yeah.
Now, I see you have Trishul in there. Do you ever use that? I think I did see you use it, didn't I?
I may have.
I feel like I
do summon him sometimes. It's not common, but you will summon him sometimes just to clear space.
Mm-hmm.
Because some people will just like try to floodgate all your monsters and then you can't do anything. Or they'll like Fiendish Chain multiple monsters and then try to lock you up.
Right.
And then you can just banish all your monsters, summon a Trishula. And then there's also synergy with Witchcrafter Patronus. So you banish 3 of your monsters, summon the Trishula, and then Patronus can shuffle back the monsters you banished for spell cards.
All right. So one thing I also wanted to point out, draw loan as your skill. What's up with that?
All right, so draw loan is a skill that you can add a copy of to your hand.
Of which card was that?
Of Lucky Loan.
Lucky Loan, okay.
Yes. And the drawback is that you skip your next draw phase.
Oof.
So if you want to know what Lucky Loan does, I'm sorry, I literally have no idea. The whole purpose of the card is so that you add a free spell to your hand, and then with that free spell, it's a new card that lets you activate your Witchcrafter effects.
Right. So that when you have to reveal cards in your hand or whatever, you have an additional one, or if you can discard it to use
Yeah,
for Witchcrafter effects.
yeah. So
Okay.
say you have 4 Witchcrafter monsters, you can activate the skill, add a spell to your hand, and now you can start playing.
Okay. So you could do it right on turn one.
Yes.
Okay. So here is a caveat. I'm going to point out that a lot of people say if your deck has to rely on a skill to work, it's not a good deck. So if you're using a skill to unbrick yourself, is it truly a good deck?
I think it just seems like a strange argument, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's a lot of decks that may require a skill, but there's some that uh, they function without the skill, or like the skill is just letting them like do something incredibly like unfair, for example.
But I mean, if you're
Um,
breaking it up that you feel there's not enough consistency to get the deck started, and you have to use a skill to get your deck started, is it that good of a deck? Is it that consistent? Would we call it brick crafters, perhaps?
I don't think so. I'm like I'm trying to think of some decks like you look at Elements series and they used Sorcery Conduit for like a long time, and then like they nerfed Sorcery Conduit, they just moved to Destiny Draw. You know,
Mm-hmm.
like yeah, maybe the deck like relies on the skill, but if the deck is still good, it can live past some skill nerfs.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like even if the deck relies on a skill to be good, it's still good, you know?
Right. Okay. So you think it would live past losing this skill?
I think so. I've played the deck with Draw Alone. I've played it with Power of Dark. Um, Back when Show of Nightmares was the best skill to play it, I used Show of Nightmares. It's like even if there's probably going to be a best skill to play the deck with, but the deck still functions without having a skill. Therefore, it's not going to die if the skill gets hit.
All right, so we've covered a little bit about the deck. We've talked about the deck, the skill, and everything. Um, so let's get down to why is this a tier 2 deck?
So
Power
ask
ranking
me.
says this deck is doo-doo. But to be
So
fair, it did get, I think, a top 2 in Battle Phase today.
it did get top 2 in Battle Phase today. It also got top 4 in Battle Phase
That
yesterday.
that one doesn't count. That one doesn't count.
So the thing about representation is that typically good decks will be represented more, and then bad decks will be represented less. However, correlation does not indicate causation.
Okay.
So just because a deck is represented less does not indicate that it is a bad deck.
But if it's represented less and it's not performing as well, isn't that a bad deck? Isn't that where we're in Stromberg territory?
Well, if the deck is not being played perfectly, there are times when uh, that can just tank performance.
But can everybody play a deck perfectly, Nick? I know you keep saying that, and not everybody sits around on stream at 1 o'clock in the morning with charts and graphs figuring out the perfect way to play a deck.
So the thing about that is that just learn.
Forehead.
Yeah, just learn forehead. Like, um, this is not trying to be rude. It's just that um, people misplay, and
Hmm.
it's like you have to accept that you're gonna misplay. Everybody misplays. Like
Right.
world people who've been to worlds misplay. Like it doesn't matter who you are. It's just a matter of learning from your mistakes and like identifying why are you losing and like what problems are happening, and then what can you do to fix your games so that you don't lose those games in the future. And I
Hmm.
think Witchcrafter has a lot of those scenarios. So there's a lot of like interactions where if you make a very small mistake, you might get punished more than like a different deck. I think, for example, Invoked Neos, that was a deck where people in Twitch chat would often like just call it an idiot deck or just say it was dumb because like you can make really dumb plays and then still win with it.
Mm-hmm.
The thing for Witchcrafter is that you can't make as many mistakes and then still win. So it's fine that if you make those mistakes, you just have to understand that a deck should not be judged by it being played imperfectly, because you can play any deck imperfectly. You should be judging it by how well it can perform when it is played at its best.
Okay. So at its best, this is a tier 2 deck.
Well, I think it could be tier 1 potentially.
Oh, come on, Nick. Come on.
That's just me.
You got
That's
enough
just my
people
opinion.
like not sleeping at night. Are you really gonna drop that on them in this video?
Well, I just think that there's so much room for the deck to still grow, and that if you play perfectly, you win so many games. It's kind of nuts, and that's why I think so highly of the deck. You know, like, I wouldn't be playing this deck if I thought it was bad. If I thought the deck was bad, I'd just like leave it and I don't know, play Karakuri or something.
Well, why wouldn't you play this in the KC Cup? Because I know it's not a time factor, because we discussed that before, right? As long as you're getting solid and consistent wins, time really isn't an issue.
In KC Cup, I played Triamids, which is somewhat slower control deck.
Right.
So once again, time is not an issue, but I chose to play a deck that I thought would do well against the meta.
Mm-hmm.
So
So Witchcrafters wouldn't be good against that meta, but you feel that they're a better matchup right now? And why is that?
in KC Cup, it was very heavily dominated by Karakuri. And so the Witchcrafter versus Karakuri matchup is very coin flip. You don't want to be flipping coins in a KC Cup. You want to have like convincing wins.
Okay. So what is Witchcrafter match up so well against right now, or all these decks that it matches up against, that you're like, this is tier 2 or possibly tier 1? I mean, what's different now?
So I think just the landscape of decks has changed a decent amount. For example, Blackwings, they lost Blackbird Close, which was one of their primary win conditions against Witchcrafter.
Mm-hmm.
There's also a lot less counter traps. So, like Invoked Neos, one of their primary win conditions was Ultimate Providence,
Mm-hmm.
because it can negate a Madame Bear. But the removal of counter traps from the meta really strengthens Witchcrafter. Also, the rise of Cristrons and Ritual Beasts, both of those are favorable matchups for the deck. And just in general, like the decks that it struggled against were also nerfed. So it's not like Witchcrafter was the only deck that got a hit.
Okay. So going forward with this, maybe we get a little insight right now into next week's tier list. I don't know. I'm just saying. How do you think Witchcrafters is going to be doing?
I think it might stay in the same spot. There's a chance it might get demoted. There's a lot of
spoiler.
Spoiler
alert.
There's a lot of disagreement in the EPC, like about what decks belong where.
Mm-hmm.
Like I know a lot of people have said that they think Invoked Roid should be tiered, but there's a lot of players in the top player council that think Invoked Roids do not belong on the tier list.
Okay, and where are they currently? Like tier 3?
They are not tiered.
Oh, they are not tiered. Well, that's good. That's where they belong, right, Herf?
Right, Herf?
Right, Herf? All right.
Herf says yes.
So going forward, you think they might drop?
I think not everybody on the TPC like thinks the same way or like uses the same methodology.
Mm-hmm.
So the position of Witchcrafter is potentially volatile, I should say.
Okay. So if you're somebody that looks at the tier list and decides on how to buy decks based on the tier list, would you say that's a good practice?
I think so.
Yeah.
There are times when it's like it can be kind of iffy. Just like immediately after a ban list, there is uncertainty in the tier list, and decks are placed like with the best of our ability. However, over time, the gem guide will it like automatically will determine what is the like strongest choice to invest in.
Well, if someone sees Witchcrafter at tier 2 this week and starts building it, and then next week it falls off the list, isn't that rather unproductive?
Well, if you go to the gem guide, it will actually recommend ritual beasts, for example.
Well, yeah, but I'm just saying, someone sees the tier list, they see Witchcrafter's tier 2, that's all they need. Like, that's it. It's tier 2. I can go in on it now. And then next week it's tier 7.
Well, I still think it's a good deck. So I would say like I don't think at any point it's a mistake to go for it.
Mm-hmm.
It's just if you want to feel safe about your investment, it's like checking the gem guide. You should be going for whatever the most recommended deck is.
Okay, and that right now is not Witchcrafters.
Presently, it is Ritual Beast. Yes.
Okay. I like how you deflected that question. All right. Was there anything else you wanted to get into here? I think we've covered it pretty well. We've gone over why the tier list is, or how the tier list is made, and who's on the console and why. We kind of reviewed the deck, why it's a tier 2 deck in Neg's opinion. Was there anything else you wanted to get into?
Nothing really comes to mind. No.
Yeah, I think we covered it all. So I'm sure if you guys want to, in the comments below, you can tell us what we missed. I feel like we've covered it pretty well. Or if you have any questions for Neg, put them in the comments below. He'll answer every single one, even if you just want to know what his favorite cereal is.
Yeah. TPC will review all questions at Denny's.
All right, guys. I hope you liked the video, and if you did, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and get into our Discord, because that's where we host all of our tournaments. They're always free to enter, all right? And we got a great new player help channel, which if you have any questions, you can get in there and ask and get the help that you need, all right? So we're going to get out of here. I'm Circus. That's Negative1.
Peace.
See ya.